Hi. We're gonna just about to get started. I'm so excited to see you. My name is Eric Hodgson. I'm the chair of our Economic Development Commission in North Branford. And before anything, I wanted to thank you for personally coming out and spending your time to help us as a town decide how we're going to try to develop the area in the Route 139, Route 80 corridor. I know that everyone has a lot of exciting things to do on Saturday, but it really shows your dedication to the town and to the betterment of our community that you're here. This process is the culmination of about 1.5 years of planning with Economic Development Commission. Around the beginning of this process, we looked around our town and we said, what is the single most important thing that we can do to try to help create an identity for North Branford and to try to encourage appropriate types of business to come here into our town. And we, of course, you couldn't pass through a town without noticing that there was a lot of construction happening on Route 80 for the past, forever, it seems. And so we said, we really should focus on that as a process to think about how to develop that area. From the very beginning, we wanted this to be an open process that would involve as many people from the town as possible, all of the key stakeholders, the citizens, business owners, civic groups, just so that we as a town could get a better sense of what we wanted for that area. I really strongly believe that change is inevitable, and if we don't decide what we want to do with that area, then we're going to get exactly what we don't want. And so I think we need to be proactive, and so we started this process, and here we are, 1.5 years later. We're very, very, very excited. What I wanted to do is to just introduce some people, the members of our Economic Development Commission, who've been working very hard to bring this to the front, if they could stand. Daniel Arman. Jan Finch, Joan Tudor's not here today, but she's a member, and Diane Policio. Thank you very much for all your help. And also, Michael Paulus, our town manager, has been very instrumental in helping us. Before I introduce, I'm not going to talk a lot because it's not important what I say, it's important what we come up with as a group. But before I introduce other people, I just wanted to set kind of the ground rules, that we are not making any decisions today. This is an opportunity to gather information and to open our minds to think about what are the possibilities for the development of that area. So there's going to be another meeting probably in a few months where we come up with ideas today. Dr. Platus will come up with better ideas and bring them back to us so that we can see kind of the next step in the process. Please keep an open mind. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but everyone wants to share their opinion and wants their opinion to be valued. So also have fun. This should be a lot of fun. And also please stay involved, that as we move on in this process, we're going to really want you to stay as active as possible so that we can bring something to really happen in this area. One major supporter of this process was our mayor, Mayor Candelora, who's here. Oh, here he is. All right, thank you. Did you want to say a few words? Or?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hodgson. And I do want to thank our Economic Development Committee. I've been to several of their meetings, and they are excited, energized. Carol Zev has been involved, our town manager, Mike Paulus. And as they say, it takes a village to build a town. And all of you here show your commitment. We have a wonderful community, and who better knows what we want in our town but the people in our town. So as Dr. Hodgson said, and I'll echo it, this process is wonderful, and I really look forward to hearing the ideas and all the different development ideas. This is an important area in our town. It's a focal point, and hopefully through this process we can come up with a wonderful plan that will help develop and bring in some business, jobs, and boost that area and make it a showcase that it truly can be. So thank you all for coming out, and stay involved and tell your friends, family, whoever else. And I think we can come up with a wonderful project. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank Dr. Plaza.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Professor Alan Platus. He's from the Urban Design Workshop at Yale. He and his project manager, Andre Horwell, are going to lead the process right now. So I'd like to welcome them and say thank you for coming.
First of all, you should probably give yourselves a round of applause. This is a really impressive turnout, and maybe even too impressive. We came equipped to set up 8 workstations, and so those of you who are not sitting at tables with plans and equipment on them may, when we get reorganized in about 20-30 minutes, want to fill in the available seats. There are some at the tables that are set up as workstations. If we can't get everybody around one of those tables, then we'll improvise. But there are spaces. They may not look like it. This is, as I'm sure you're recognizing right now, a young people-sized set of facilities. We have done, by the way, projects like these with young people and with mixes of adults and young people, and those are really lively, as you might imagine. But for this afternoon, at least, we're going to have to make do, for the most part, with a slightly different scale. So it'll be very cozy and very warm if we fill in the work tables. I'm going to give a brief introduction, but I want to give a preview first, and I want to say a word or two about what Andre and I do. We are both on the faculty of the School of Architecture at Yale University. That's our day job. But we also run a community design center that I started over 20 years ago, based at the School of Architecture. And in that period of time, we've worked with communities, towns, cities, neighborhoods, all over the state of Connecticut, all over the New England region, and actually in the last 10 years or so, all over the world. And our real passion is engaging with local communities. We are professionals, but we believe that in the kind of work that we're going to be sharing today, one gets better results. Maybe one can only get good results when there is a clear way for a community to participate as a whole. And certainly that's what we're going to try to get started today. This is not, as Eric said, the end of the process. It's really the beginning of the process. We hope to get as many of you and more people back together again, maybe in a month or two, after we've had a chance to process what you tell us today and start to come up with some clear options to present to you folks as to what might happen along this key corridor in your town. So this is really just the beginning, and we do hope, actually we need your ongoing input and participation. Now, a number of you have already been in touch with us since we've started with the EDC. You've either come to EDC meetings, which are public meetings, or you've written letters to the EDC or to Mike, and those have been passed along to us. So we're already starting to gather your thoughts and ideas, your concerns, your issues, your vision for what this part of your town could be. So this is part of that process. Now, as you can probably already tell, the core of what we're going to do this afternoon, after I say a few more words and give an introduction, is really your work with your fellow citizens around these tables and around these plans to do a little brainstorming in the next hour or two. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for folks to come up and share with everybody those ideas that your table came up with. And Andre and I record all of this. And by the way, you should know, if you haven't figured it out already, that we're being taped today as a public meeting. So you and your friends and neighbors and relatives are very likely to see you on TV later. You should probably keep that in mind in the course of the afternoon. But as Eric already said, we don't want to pull any punches. We want to hear what's on your mind. We need to hear what's on your mind. We need your ideas. We need your concerns. There is no one right answer to this, and any development process, any redevelopment process is a long process. The successful ones often take a lifetime. I often say that in the design professions, architects are the most immediate gratified professionals. They either get the job or they don't, and if they get the job, they might actually see something a few years later if they're lucky. Our urban designers and planners like Andre and I probably have to wait 10 to 20 years, and landscape architects rarely live to see their best ideas come to full fruition unless they plant kudzu, and it grows very fast. So this really is what we're doing today. We're doing for ourselves, but we're also doing for our children and grandchildren to direct a process that will undoubtedly unroll over a long period of time. So I'll give you a little bit more information about what's in front of you on the table and what we expect. But first I want to show a few images to get us thinking about what some of the issues might be, and then you will no doubt have your own. My title slide already, I think, suggests to you the full spectrum of what you and visitors experience when they drive through North Branford on the Route 80 corridor, from the beautiful and wonderful character of a still fundamentally rural and suburban New England community to an area that, like so many of our other areas, has been transformed really in the last half century into a collection of automobile-oriented uses, signage, parking lots, road work, you name it, that has grown up willy-nilly, not always in the way that we as citizens and visitors would most like. They're often determined by narrowly commercial requirements, narrowly traffic-oriented requirements, self-interest, if you will. None of these things are bad, but we believe as designers that our job is to balance and coordinate all of those different requirements so that we can produce for our communities win-win situations where we don't have to give up the things we love about our community in order to get the things we need, whether it's smoothly moving, safe vehicular traffic, a vital commercial environment, whatever it may be. We believe that there is, in almost all cases, a win-win solution where these things can be brought into balance, into harmony, can support each other. And so that's why, one of the reasons why, we need all the voices in the room. Some of you will be concerned about open space. Some of you will be concerned about pedestrian safety. Some of you will be concerned about smoothly moving traffic. Some of you will be concerned about boosting, as the EDC is, understandably, boosting the tax base of the community. Again, we need to hear from all of you, because it's only by hearing your ideas and your concerns that we can do our job as design professionals, trying to come up with options that begin to balance those, and at the same time to attract the kind of investment with which your community can move forward. Next slide, Andre. This is the general area that we've been asked to look at in a satellite photograph. You know it probably all too well. It's changed in recent years. Some of you may know, some of you may remember that we were here about 7 or 8 years ago, before the road work was done on Route 80, looking at the same area. So we're very pleased to be back again. The circumstances are different. The work is almost completed. There's still some landscaping to do, and Carol has has brought along some images, some plans that show the full build-out proposed for the landscaping in some critical areas, if you want to take a look at those later on. But for the most part, those transformations have taken place, and now it's time to look again at some of the key sites along that corridor. Next slide, Andre. This image from a few years ago shows some of the key landmarks along that corridor, from your current town hall to the site of the old town hall, which we'll be looking at in particular today as an opportunity site, and some of the other landmarks like the library, key road intersections along the way. We should say that the core area of this that the EDC has asked us to focus on is pretty much the area from the railway trestle to the historic district and the area around the library. That is about a half-mile section, which is not very long. In fact, in our field, in urban design, we usually think of a quarter to a half mile as a comfortable pedestrian walking distance, all other things being equal. So often when we're doing transit-oriented development, we'll draw a quarter-mile radius around a bus station or a train station and say, within that, everything should be able to work at a pedestrian scale. And we've already received some very thoughtful letters from some of you about your concerns that the core of your community needs to be more pedestrian friendly. Better sidewalks, better crosswalks, more accessible, all of those things. And one of the things that maps and plans remind us is that it's really, at the end of the day, not a huge area. We're just used to using our cars always to get from one place to another. Next slide, Andre. It's also not a terribly heavily built up area. It may seem developed to you, but for the most part, it still has relatively rural densities. I should mention that one of the things we're doing this time, at the request of the EDC, but it's something that we're keen on as well, we're working with a good friend of ours, Lawrence Kenny of AMS Consulting, and Larry is doing, while we're working on the design, a market analysis to look at the prevailing economic forces in your town, but also in the wider region, to give our thoughts some degree of realism and credibility about the things that could be developed in this area. And one of the things, Larry's given us a fairly detailed preliminary report. He could have been here last time when we got snowed out, couldn't make it today, but he's going to be with us through the process. One of the things that his report reminds us is something you all know very well. The scale of development, both residential and commercial in North Branford, is quite small compared to your neighboring towns. 70% of your retail is in small developments or buildings of 10,000 square feet or less. That's tiny by contemporary standards. You only have 3 commercial developments that are upward of 40,000 square feet, which is itself already fairly small by comparison with the scale of most automobile-oriented commercial development these days. Is that bad news? Not necessarily. What it means is that however you might feel about their appearance, and we'll talk about that in a moment, the scale of most development in North Branford is still very manageable, still very small scale, almost always, as you can see, separated by large areas of landscape, of open space, of very vivid topography. All of those things contribute to the rural feel of the town. Next slide, Andre. But when you get down to the scale of individual developments, the story's not always as happy as you might imagine. Now, I'm not going to pick on any particular site at all today. You all know the corridor far better than I do, except to say that there's not a single site along Route 80 that couldn't be improved by some better landscaping, a more attractive and better organized treatment of parking and service, better drainage, by the way, better stormwater management, all of those things that we should be thinking about, and of course also by a little bit of an investment in signage and architecture as well that improves the visual appeal and appearance. And of course property owners, particularly small property owners, because another thing that Larry's report tells us is that most of the businesses in North Branford are locally owned and operated. They're not national chains for the most part. So people are running on fairly tight budgets. And one of the things we hope to look at as we work with the EDC is how resources can be made available, how investment can be supported and stimulated at the property by property level, so that very serious contributing property owners and business owners can participate in the overall improvements that one would like to see in the corridor as a whole. So that's part of it as well. But we're not asking you today to redesign anybody's building for them. I suppose that could be something you might want to do. If you want to show us what you think good signage looks like, we're happy to see that as well. But we're going to be involved in a little bit more of a planning exercise where we look at mitigating the effects that have actually produced the landscape that you know out there. Next slide. So this is not North Branford. But there are, by the way, views in North Branford, if you crop your photograph properly, that can produce a similar kind of effect. So the management of view corridors and what you see, landscaping, can really change people's perception of the town. What we tend to be looking at now is not a traditional New England village for the most part. Next slide. Or even a traditional Main Street environment like your, the Main Street in your neighboring town of Madison. Next slide. What we are looking at is the result of over a half century of automobile-oriented development in this country. After World War II, patterns of development dramatically shifted, and I can see from looking around the room that most of you, like me, lived through that shift from a very different pattern of life and development to one that was spreading out now, really oriented around automobiles, and it produced some beautiful residential neighborhoods and, in many cases, some horrific commercial strips. That you'll be happy to know that's in California, not in Connecticut. But it could be in Connecticut, yes, of course. Streets are a little wider. And my favorite figure in all of this, who's my favorite figure? My favorite figure, if I can get out my pointer here, are these brave pair of people here. I don't know if they're still with us or not. So next slide, Andre. And the style of commercial development that went with it got less and less pedestrian scale, pedestrian friendly, bigger and bigger, more and more isolated, so that you all know the characteristic pattern of going to a site next door to the one you're at, but getting back in your car, driving out to the road, driving 50 feet, 100 feet down the road, pulling into another asphalt paved parking lot, getting out of your car again. Why? Because there's no reasonable way to walk there, nor would anybody think you were in your right mind if you tried to do that. So, next slide. You don't have much of this in North Branford. What's fascinating to us as designers is that in those same years, many of our colleagues were coming up with simple ways of mitigating the impact of strip-style, auto-oriented development. Things as simple as putting parking lots behind buildings. Next slide. And today, all over the country, there are communities just like North Branford that are exploring ways to reclaim those corridors that have been partially or completely transformed by auto-oriented development. These are two fictional images. A before image of a largely automobile-oriented corridor with big or small parking lots, unconnected development patterns, little landscaping, everything built around the car. And this is a proposed, on the right, retrofit of that same area where buildings are redeveloped closer to the right-of-way with more landscaping. Parking is shared in some cases, which is a good thing to do when you can do it, or relocated to other corridors. This is happening now all over the country. Next slide. And even shopping malls from the 50s and 60s, as they decline economically, are being chopped up and reconfigured as town centers. So this is what we're talking about, of reclaiming your town for pedestrian scale use, for more scenic use, for public space, is not an exotic thing to be talking about. Next slide. These are three images that of all groups the Sierra Club produced of the gradual transformation of an auto-oriented corridor over time. And we're, based on what we come up with you, we're going to do some of these views. We're going to try to help you envision in a very literal way the before and after condition of some of the corridor. Because you deserve those documents in order to make decisions, but also developers who come to the community to do projects, to make investments in the town, need to know at a very explicit level what you want your community to look like. You shouldn't ask them to guess. You shouldn't ask them to only read an abstract zoning document. You should ask them to look at the designs that we come up with together and say, that's the kind of thing we want to see happen in our town. Next slide. In the 20s and 30s, there were wonderful auto-oriented commercial and mixed-use developments that created public spaces, like this one in Lake Forest. Next slide. Or this one in Palos Verdes, California, where a beautiful little commercial center with plenty of parking, by the way, and a big fountain in the middle, is wrapped around a civic space. A space that is not only the space of the businesses, but a space for the community. Next slide. And one of the best examples that I know is Palmer Square in Princeton, which most people who go through there assume was built sometime in the colonial era, but was in fact built in the 1920s and 30s as very simple commercial mixed-use development with apartments above that makes a square in the middle of town that wasn't there before. It was new as of the 1920s and 1930s, that has become the heart of the community. So the possibility of making new spaces, using new development to configure public space that gives your community an identity is very real. Where are we doing it in Connecticut? Next slide. Actually, another image of Palmer Square, a couple of images of Palmer Square. Next slide. Where are we doing it in Connecticut? Well, we're doing it as we speak in stores. In Mansfield, where UConn and the town of Mansfield decided together that they needed something other than strip-style development, something that would function more like a town center and serve the university community as well as the local community. And phase one of this is now under construction, and it's built around a teeny little town square that's really not much more than about 150 by 150 feet. Next slide. But that is envisioned in the future as something other than a road, something other than a parking lot, something other than a building, but rather a place where people come not only to shop, but to sit and eat a sandwich, or to go to a concert, or to do the kinds of things that towns do when they get together, when the weather's a little better outside. Next slide. So in 2006, when we worked with North Branford before, we looked at the old town hall site and came up with 5 or 6 different ways of doing mixed-use development on it. This is one of them, where, as I said before, we were trying to balance the circulation of traffic, access to the site, enough parking to serve the proposed commercial uses, some mixed-use development, some residential rental units. We were looking at alternate uses for the older 1920s building up the hill. That used to be the elementary school. One of the proposals that surfaced, and I think the one that's illustrated here, is its reuse as a restaurant. But there are other things that you might think of in the way of community centers, arts centers, uses that might preserve that building. In your groups, you're free to put a big X through it if you want to, but you're also welcome, more than welcome, to give us some ideas about how that little, it's quite a little building, only about 2,700 square feet, how that little building might be reused. Next slide. We looked at the 3-dimensional development of it, and one of the things you'll notice is that every scheme we did, I'm only going to show you this one, but the report is available, every scheme we did had a generous amount of new public space. That took some of the land where the ball field used to be and reconfigured it as a town green, basically, that could support various activities, various gatherings, and at the same time, that sense of identity, which we've heard from people over time, is associated with places like the library and other public buildings in the historic district, but not so much with other sites throughout the town. Next slide. So that's the area that we're asking you to focus on today. You have on your table a big aerial photograph which goes along the corridor. The radius is, Andre, a quarter-mile radius, just to give you a sense of scale. So that's a quarter mile, 440 yards, usually about a 5 to 10 minute walk in good weather if you're moving along. At least it should be that kind of walk. Next slide. And every table has one of these plans. Now, we took the old town hall off the site. If there are people who feel strongly about putting it back on, should feel free to do that. It's in the satellite photograph. It's about a 4,000 plus square foot building. But in previous studies, the assumption is that it would be very difficult to develop new commercial development and public space on the site, keeping that building on the site. But that doesn't mean we won't figure out something quite brilliant in terms of reuse. But it's not on the plan that you're given. The heavy dotted lines are property lines. And one of the things that you'll notice is that there's a panhandle back in the woods that is an old trolley right-of-way that's technically part of the old town hall site. We haven't yet figured out what you can do with it, maybe a trolley, but wouldn't go very far. There is, of course, some wetland area at the southeastern corner of the site. We're not going to ask you to worry too much about that today from a technical point of view. And then now, as the Route 139, Route 80 intersection has been reconfigured, as you know, there's a big hill slope that runs down from that corner into the site that you might or might not want to take advantage of, but that is a big slope at that particular point. So each table has one of those documents. We've also given you, next slide, Andre, 2 sheets with a bunch of building footprints on them. That's to make your work quicker and easier. Now the scale, if you care about size and scale, an inch on your plan equals 40 feet. And we've given every table a scale that you can use if you want to get as precise as measuring things. There is no, I mean, I suppose if we wanted to make the problem really difficult, we'd say you have to put all of these on the site, but of course you couldn't without a rather bizarre high-rise building. But it's to suggest not only some of the uses, but how big they are. So those of you who are not planners or architects have some sense of what you're working with. That's, you can use them or not as the case may be. We've got tracing paper on every table, so what you can do is you can trace over them and transfer them to the site plan, or just be as impressionistic as you want to be. One of the things that's worth knowing, I'll give you a little planning 101 course. If you propose 1 square foot of new commercial space on the site, probably you're going to end up at the end of the day with a roughly equivalent area of parking. So if you propose 10,000 square feet of new retail, you're probably going to have to find a place for, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or so cars. And that's going to be with some landscaping and the necessary vehicular circulation in the neighborhood of another 10,000 square feet. So that's one of the tough things about doing development today. It would be great if we could imagine that all of the people who are going to go shop or eat at a restaurant or live on this site in the future would ride bicycles or walk and not have cars. But realistically, nobody can do development, commercial or residential or otherwise, without providing parking spaces for their residents, tenants, or customers. One of the things that you might want to take into account is that Larry, in looking at in his preliminary look at the markets around here, has reminded us that while we've bounced back a little bit from 2008, the market is still pretty flat for office development. There's not a lot of office development, relatively speaking, in North Branford to begin with, but some of you may know about opportunities. In fact, some of you may be looking for office space. Put yourself on the site in that case. But the office market has come back, if at all, very, very slowly. Most of the limited amount of office space in North Branford is Class C office space, so there may be an opportunity for some higher-end office space that's not currently being met, professional offices of one kind or another. The commercial market is quite variable. As you all know, North Branford has a tiny share of the regional commercial market. And that's in part because of your road network. You're further, for better or for worse, from Interstate 91 than your neighbors in East Haven are, for example. So they get, for better or for worse, they get the bigger box uses and have the sites for those. That may be a blessing in disguise. But yeah, well, so in any case, the commercial market is slow, but there are some opportunities there. And North Branford has some sectors which you know, for instance, higher-end dining is underrepresented actually in the regional market except for downtown New Haven. So that's something to think about as well. The residential market in North Branford is 86% home ownership and condos. Well, home ownership, single-family homes and condos, 86%. So there's a relatively small segment that's served by rental housing, and yet rental housing is the hottest market in the region right now. So that's something to think about as well. That not just in North Branford, but throughout the region, rentals are generally, there's a high occupancy level. Some of you may know that New Haven, particularly downtown New Haven, has one of the highest occupancy rates of any market in the entire United States right now. So there are some forces in that area. That's just a little bit of background. Okay, so it's about 1:45. I'm going to shut up. Andre and I are going to circulate around, so if you want to talk to us about something or ask a question, raise your hand. We're going to ask the EDC members to spread out among the tables, mostly to listen to what people have to say. And each of the tables should, now I think there's a pad of paper, yes, on each of the tables. I put some around. Somebody should either appoint themselves or be appointed note taker for the table, and that person or somebody else should be prepared in about an hour or so from now to report back. So what we're going to do is we're going to let you go for an hour to brainstorm in any way that you can. At the end of that hour, we'd really love it if every group had notes or pictures or whatever you want to put on the big blank plan. We're going to ask each group to bring their plan up here and share it with the assembled group, and take really no more than 2 or 3 minutes to summarize the main points that came up in your group. That's the hardest assignment, given the fact that you're going to be talking to each other for an hour and you're going to produce a lot of ideas and issues, but some of them will be the same from table to table. So we'll do the best we can, but we'd love it if you would put notes and drawings and whatever goes on that. Each of you have a little bag, a little kit. It's got some Post-its in it. You can use Post-its. It's got some colored markers. Trees are generally green in the planning world, if not in reality. And I think it's got some stick-on dots that you can use also to indicate other things that you want to call our attention to. Does anybody have any burning questions? Yes. You're a ringer, Lindsay.
I think I know, I should, but on this, it says Old Town Hall,
That's the old school, I'm sorry.
school, not the town.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Bert. What it indicates is the current alignment of the road, but not accurately the topography. Yeah, over here. Well, in our previous work, we were asked to take a look at Central Plaza. Central Plaza and the area in between Central Plaza and the site we're focused on is very much in play, but we decided that for this afternoon we wouldn't take on the rather more difficult task of trying to redesign Central Plaza. Central Plaza, as everybody knows, is one of your biggest concentrations of retail, but it's also got a very complex, that's a nice way of saying it, it's got a very complex layout. And if you have thoughts or suggestions about that site in relation to this site, share them with us, please. Yeah. I think you can assume, for the sake of what you're doing, that it has full utility access. Yeah.
Who gets the final say on whatever?
Well, so here's a question. Who gets the final say? There's no easy answer to that, but you're part of the equation, because almost certainly any development that would be proposed for this site would either be a process that was controlled by the town, or if it was a private development process, would need town approval. Our work with you over the next several months is to try to, as closely as possible, elicit your positive vision of what should happen so that that can be a guide for future development. Yeah?
Where would the curb cut be for access?
Listen, if I had an easy answer to that question, I would tell you. There is a curb cut. There's a current curb cut, as you know, that I believe is shown, yes it is, that gives access to the old school and the old town hall and the parking on the hill. That's one curb cut. There almost certainly has to be one or two more curb cuts, and locating those is a challenge. Don't beat your head against the wall. Just do the best you can with that. It's for engineers to figure that out at the end of the day. Yeah.
Given the status of the Route 80 corridor at this point, being almost completely done at this point, what amendments could we hope to get in terms of pedestrian bike access?
I can't predict that, but I would encourage you in this kind of work to ask for anything you think would be desirable, and not to assume that it's impossible. You may have heard people tell you before that's impossible. In my experience in 35 years doing this kind of work, sometimes the impossible is possible. So, yeah, one more and then let's get to work. We haven't been, it's quite wet down there, and we haven't been able to figure out anything that the expense of doing it would probably not be worth. It's certainly not a developable dimension, except maybe as a driveway, but there are drainage issues back there. So if you have a great idea, maybe a trout stream would be good there. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have looked into doing something like that, and we're told no because of the water.
Yeah, it's pretty wet. So, again, unless it's a trout stream, it's probably going to be tough. Okay, folks, those of you who are not around a table where there's work material, there's still some chairs at various tables, so join a group and roll up your sleeves and let's get going.
So really, it's focused on this?
So if you want to, the other ground rule is that whoever the reporter is, we'd ask you to stand here so that the videographer can make sure that they record your immortal words. Lindsay.
That's a tough act to follow. All right, I'm going to come clean right away. Alan was my professor, and Andre was my student. So I'm getting the warm fuzzies up here already. All right, we're group one, and here's what we figured out. Because of where it is, and because of the history of this town, it really had no center because it didn't come. It was a legislative act at one point where they said, okay, Branford is now two different places. Boom. So what we'd like to do is take this opportunity to make a center. And one of the best ways to do that is the connectivity of all of the transit things that are going on here. So there's Route 80, of course. And one of the first things we identified was this trail here, or rather this long panhandle. It actually, with a couple of little hiccups here, connects all the way to Guilford with other trails. So if we want fewer cars, we want to have people on bicycles, we want to have people in strollers and walking, we need to give them a pleasant, safe place to do that. So we thought this would be terrific to enhance this. We even get a few little nature moments as you go over the rivers here. This was identified as the town does, the historical district. And we found important civic things all the way over to here. This is Reynolds Beer's house, the barn, the library, and down here at the other end, at the edge of the commercial, the civic here, the emergency responders right by the railroad trestle. So this, we looked a little bit on larger scale, unfortunately, here, but we wanted to connect this together. So what this has to do is connect all of these things. The old town hall, and one of the best ways we wanted to connect it first and foremost was just good old-fashioned sidewalks, ADA accessible, so that you can actually get across the street without taking your life in your hands. And what we would like to do is use these buildings here, but we really didn't want to do much. We wanted to keep this as open as possible, and it be the hub. So there would be bus service that does not stop just out here in front of the elementary school, the middle school, but it would come all the way up to here, here, and here. We would have this mainly as an open space for farmers markets, for food trucks, for supplemental parking, for events, and also for the commercial folks. We want very much to support these people, bringing people into the town that will then spend their pockets full of money. In the park central itself, we would like to have a skateboard park that in the wintertime can turn into an ice skating rink so that it's not just a lonely, barren thing throughout the winter. Bocce courts, playground, seating, games, this sort of things. Even the possibility for a monument or a fountain or something like that, something centralizing here, but actually not building that up. We would much rather see commercial being built up here along the edge of the hillside to help connect all of this and have people have a reason, a retail reason for supporting all of this. I feel my time is up. You've been a wonderful audience. Try the beer.
We can finally give Lindsay his degree now. After all these years. Group 2. We'll take it.
Is that good?
That's good.
Say when.
That's good.
Great.
Let's see. There you go. Thank you. All right, we came up with some ideas. Primarily, we were thinking just about this area, and one of our thoughts was if we develop this correctly, we've got, let's see, where are we? Over here is the Central Plaza, and we've got Route 80 going this way. So our thought was if we develop this the right way, make it really nice, beautiful, useful, in 5 or 6 years, maybe we'd be talking about what we do over here, because we can, that'll be kind of inconsequential at that point. But what we were thinking about here was keeping the parking where it is, using the old school, the old town hall, whatever you want to call that, as a kind of a central area, maybe a restaurant, build a nice historic looking restaurant there. Everywhere that you see from Route 80 and 139, put a green area, maybe with a fountain, benches, trees, the whole green area, lots of walkways, but something attractive from the road. And then mixed use in the middle, retail on the ground floor, walkways to get from the parking behind you don't see, by the way. You won't even be able to see the parking from Route 80 or 139. Walkways to go from the parking to the green, in between the buildings, and then in here, this could be offices up top or apartments up top, and then retail of some sort down below. And, the other part of it is a greenway over here. Again, I think that's probably a common theme. It looks like something that makes a lot of sense. As it was already mentioned, it goes all the way to Guilford in this direction, all the way to New Haven in the other direction, and it seems like, it would be a shame to not use it for something. So, that's what we came up with.
Great.
Group 3. That's okay.
Our group's consensus was pretty much to keep it as open space, and key there was access. Access being sidewalks, with pedestrian crossways pretty much all the way from the library over to 139. We thought possibly access from the central plaza over to this green space could be an aerial walkway from the plaza, so people didn't even have to cross the road, and make it look pretty. We would also urge the town at some point, if the properties adjacent to this plot of land on 139 become available, that they so purchase them, because it would enable greater access to this piece of land. With that being said, we also came up with the idea that rather than commercial development, we would like to see residential development in some portion of this, and we would also prefer it to be over 55 housing, to allow people in the town to stay in the town. Other than that, it was pretty much passive recreation. It would be trails, benches, fountains for noise abatement from all the traffic noise, and you know, possibly basketball courts, a small children's playground, picnic benches, that kind of stuff. And I think that's pretty much what we said.
There's a theme emerging here. Let's see how it keeps going. Group 4.
All right, we don't have an elaborate plan as well, but we went around the table and broke down the concerns. And concerns are this is a 5-acre parcel, and reuse the old school as a restaurant or some other venue. The general thought was that it should not be developed as a complete commercial space, because there's enough empty commercial property right now in town, and access to this area should be improved with more sidewalks and crosswalks. I think that's the general theme. One concern that we have is that right now the ball field is great and does not run off a lot of effluent into the river. If you were to asphalt a large parking space, you'd have water issues into the Branford River there. And there's a lot of traffic flow up and down the Route 8 corridor, and the thought would be to reestablish another entrance onto 139. There was some concern about residential apartments, and the thought there would be to have more property owners and not necessarily rental property. However, the over 55 community seems like a pretty wise, possibly wise idea. And that they were thinking that the Central Plaza needs to be addressed in part of the scope. And I think that's it. Great.
Group 5.
Thank you. We were graphics challenged also, so you'll just have to listen to me. All right, so one of our main ideas is sidewalks from Central Plaza at least to Atwater Library along Route 80.
You're not here.
Pardon?
You're not here.
Oh, can't hear? Okay. I didn't want to echo. Okay, sidewalks to at least Atwater Library. Also, we'd like to see them along Route 139 up at least to Hillside Terrace and North Farms Park. That seems to be a gap that has not been addressed. These sidewalks need to have appropriate crosswalks, upright signs, and paint across the road, and some should have crossing lights. There should be signs throughout the town saying that vehicles must stop for pedestrians in the roadway, just as we see in many of the surrounding towns. The town hall old school property, definitely we'd like to see a green area with a park of some sort for public use, but it seems viable also to have a mixed-use building there, office and retail first floor, residential, probably rental second and maybe third floors, depending on how it works out. Vehicle parking in the back. It'd be nice to see if the town could acquire that property, the state-owned triangle, I'll call it, and we could use that as part of the open space. Along with this is the assumption that probably the existing 2 buildings would be removed. The final, let's see, reading my notes, oh, okay. Pedestrian and bicycle access from the Notch Hill Road to the property all along that trolley trail, just as others have mentioned. Another blue sky idea. We'd like to just raise Central Plaza, raise as in R-A-Z-E, and eventually rebuild it with buildings in some sort of aesthetically pleasing style. It should include mixed office, retail, and residential use. Don't have any more firm plans than that. And should also include a green space. It should be attractive. Some of us were talking about, we go to the Dairy Queen. It's nice to, on a summer day, walk around. What is there to walk around and see there? It'd be nice if we could use that and maybe the adjacent green space across 139. And finally, in terms of funding open space, perhaps the town could engage the services of a grant writer who's expert in this regard.
Thank you. We start in the far corner there. We'll call you Group 6.
Thank you. So we Group 6 over there, and I'll just run through some of the things that we thought were good ideas. Number one was, I would say, sidewalks. And I would say, you know, sidewalks, like a lot of the other groups have said, along the street. Also green space there. There was a great idea to have a gazebo. You know, the Memorial Day Parade would normally go through there, and it'd be nice to have a place to have a gathering spot in town. Beyond that, we mostly centered around the idea of a mixed-use development with some sort of retail, possibly on the first floor, and apartments. Our group was kind of split on the apartment idea. Some people just didn't like it, the idea of having apartments there. But on the flip side, it makes it a lot easier to economically support the development when you have apartments. It's also something I don't think we have a lot of here in North Branford. Some other ideas, an urgent care facility. Since, you know, you have to travel to other towns to get those services. And let's see. We did have the idea of a park. And I think the other overriding theme is restrictive zoning on this, that people want to see something more than just a cookie cutter, you know, square box there, but something that is more, you know, aesthetically pleasing. And that's us.
You folks are doing great. This is one of the most efficient and clearest reporting sessions that we've ever had. We're going to review the tape to see what the secrets are. Group 7, a drawing. Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a drawing.
That one. Let's get it on.
There you go.
Okay, can't see them. Oh, thank you very much. We're all in kind of following the same theme here. It's basically you want to get an identity to the downtown North Branford area with pedestrian walkways, green space. Again, I think it's been mentioned a few times, we'd like to get a connection all the way from Central Plaza down to the side to the church green, all the way up there to the library. So all of this area starts to become cohesive with either the landscaping, the walkways, pedestrian activities. We're also saying that since we have the trolley track, that maybe that gets introduced into this pedestrian walkway areas as well. As you get to, this is the area that we're all talking about here with the old, with the funeral home there. And historically, again, we have we have the North Branford Church there. We don't have a lot of, and we have the North Street area. We're kind of talking about leaving this, whether it's rehabable or not, but some sort of historical context to this building here, which relates to the other historic district, again, tying this area together. Mostly all open space in here, but again, trying to incorporate the activities that, say, Lindsay talked about, whether you have bocce courts, a skating pond here made out of the old wetlands area there, a natural amphitheater, so we can start incorporating arts, have outside concerts from students, people anywhere in there. Maybe this building is, again, associated with that arts theater there, and you could have programs and use the art theater there. Part of the group too was also talking about how it doesn't work without people. So where do you get the mixed use? Where do you get the apartments? Where do you get the 30-year-olds, whoever, that aren't putting kids through the school system, but yet want to live down in here and add money and development possible to the areas. So we don't know if that area can happen in here, part of the Central Plaza scheme that people were talking about. But basically take the space that we're working with here, get it a green space, get it involved with the town, get it involved with, connecting all this area so we have a nice green area and activities for everybody to use. And that's where we're headed. So.
Can we keep that?
You sure can.
I
don't know if did I get everything, Bob?
There was another ringer in the room, I can tell.
There is
Group 8.
We kind of envisioned like a mini Six Flags with a roller coaster. We've been actually, all the same things that the other groups have been talking about, having the sidewalks extended to the library, the connectivity of the entire parcel, very important. And of course, having the sidewalks be ADA compliant with the curb cuts and whatnot. We also, most of the table was in favor of mixed-use 55 and over apartments, some variety of commercial, and open space with kind of an old town look. Kind of wanted to make sure that any new buildings that were going to be put up were aesthetically appealing, no modern ugly buildings. We discussed possible underground parking to kind of utilize more of the space, because if we put the residential apartments up and we use all the space for parking, there's going to be that much less for open space. So just exploring different possibilities with the parking. A few people at the table wanted to maintain 100% open space, and just make a big park and not really develop it at all. We were thinking about an underground tunnel possibly connecting from the Central Plaza to the parcel to make it easier to walk from the state-owned property to where the ball field is now. And we were all in favor of the bikeway and the walking trails, putting some trees in there and maybe park benches. I think that's pretty much it.
So, Andre reminds me that it would be really great if the reporters don't mind, if you have a sheet of notes like this that you brought up with it, if we could collect those before you leave. We are very serious. If any of you have seen the reports that we have done over the years from projects, there is usually a section that tries as much as possible to summarize the thoughts of workshops like these, so that even if a particular idea is not literally incorporated into a proposal, it's there in the report. I think it's very important for communities to be able to remember and to access the full range of opinion, the full range of ideas. Now, having said that,
there wasn't an enormous range of, let's say, disagreement, but rather a pretty strong sense of convergence and agreement about your priorities for this site. We clearly heard over and over again the desire for open space that is an amenity, but also a sense of identity for the community. Linkages, you folks are either all ringers or just natural-born urban planners. Linkages, pedestrian safety, greenery, bike trails, all of those good things. Commercial and mixed use, but in a limited way, limited residential. These are some of the themes that we obviously heard over and over again from almost all the groups in some configuration. I'm sure if we wrote it up right this minute and asked you all to sign it, there'd be some hesitance on everybody's part. But the good news is we have a fair amount of work and research and investigation ahead of us. And I hope one of the things that this did, certainly I heard this from going around to the groups, it gave you a little bit of direct experience of how difficult this site and many of the sites in the town are, given what Route 80 has become, given the limited amount of area, given the traffic, given the issues of access and drainage and all of those things. So we are certainly mindful of that. I think now you are, if you weren't already. And so we look forward as we get back together again, and as our team has a chance with the EDC to refine some of these ideas, to see how they actually start to fit on the ground, that you'll appreciate how challenging, but how important this work is. The other thing we heard pretty consistently from the group is a desire for any development to reinforce your vision of what the character of the town is. To be attractive, to be welcoming, to help to create a positive image for the town. And of course, we're very sensitive to that and very sympathetic to that. And we hope in future meetings again to get down to details a little bit more, to show you all some things that we do, some things that we find, and get your reaction. Because we want to be explicit about that. We want to know what it is that really does represent the best of North Branford to you. I think we have some idea of what you're worried about, but we want to try to put it in a positive frame as well. Now, we've been incredibly efficient today, and I want to point out, as I did to Mike and others, that the last one of these workshops we did was in a much bigger city, and the turnout was not nearly as good, even in absolute terms, but on a per capita basis, this is an extraordinary turnout, and I hope as many of you as possible will stay tuned and stay with us when we schedule subsequent meetings and when we try to get information out again. At the end of the day, of course, it's your town, and even though the way in which we develop in this great country is fueled as much by private interest as it is by public interest, there needs to be an important and ongoing role for the public to play in all of this. So given the fact that we have a couple of minutes left and that you all have been so good and so patient, let me ask whether anybody in the room feels like there was a point that you thought of or made in the course of the day that didn't get airtime up here that you'd like to take another 15 seconds to share with us. One over here. I'm going to pass the microphone. Well, if I don't pass the microphone, the drill is I listen to you and then I repeat it so that the room can hear it. So.
Okay. I just had a thought about across the street from this property is the hillside. It's all kind of blocked off now. Are we ever thinking of doing something like a waterfall coming off of that or anything like that?
Somebody just stole my thunder, or my clever remark, that is to say, you probably willy-nilly have unanticipated waterfalls at peak rainfall times. And managing that should certainly be part of your larger vision. As I love waterfalls, but there is also the issue of how the water gets to the top of the hill so that it can attractively run back down again. But I think water, we realize water management and making attractive water features is also something that we heard again and again, and we'll be paying attention to that as we move forward. Any other? Oh, my goodness.
I'd like to state that I think the town, I know they want to get more businesses in town, but I think they need to go after the current businesses that are already here, like the owners, the individual owners of Central Plaza, to buck it up, fix it up, and make it attractive to outside vendors. Same with the little strip plazas that are all over the place that are a mess. Buck them up, get them in shape, and so that it's open, and keep this land open.
I think one of the reasons that we're excited on your behalf for this little study is that I think there's an opportunity here in looking at this site and looking at a few others to establish some standards, right? One of the ways in which you get your neighbors and local business people to make improvements is to take that first step and set an example. So you're looking for a kind of if you will, case study or example that either can be done now from scratch or could be a renovation project. We run into this again and again because if you say to property owners, we'd like you to improve your property, everybody has a different vision of what that might mean, not surprisingly. So we hope that one thing that this report will do is illustrate the kind of improvements that we have in mind.
Same token, we don't want to bring more business in areas into town. Let them fix the ones that are empty right now.
So I hear you. Fix first and then move on from there. Yes, sir.
I'm the guy that's guilty of writing letters saving Wallfield. And my determination is to save Wallfield. In regards to what these guys from Yale are telling us about development, that's fine. But Wallfield is a park a lot of us grew up on playing. Don't sell it, but let's get enough interested people in just how we're going to use it. Ralph Coulter did some sketches where we could have the War Veterans Monuments there instead of crunched in on what's left of our green thanks to Route 80. And we could hold Memorial Day services there instead of crowding in on our green. Our green has been annihilated. The center of town has been annihilated with Route 80. The historic district that it was, they've taken down several historical homes to do this. And I think we do need to save the Wallfield as it is, to be developed in some kind of a park. And my personal interest is to save the field first. And I hope we get a group of you citizens interested in doing something with the field and stick to our guns so the town don't sell it out from under us and come up with a plan for what you want to do with Wallfield. Thank you.
And I should say that we have copies of those plans, and they're definitely part of our thinking so far about that site. Other parting shots, because we're almost reaching our limit.
Okay, folks, I'm Stephen Ofer. I've lived in this town all my life, and I don't know if everybody feels the way I do, but Central Plaza has always been a stickler on our town that never really fit in. It was buildings that were put together haphazardly. It's the center of our town. My suggestion is, and I haven't heard anybody else say it, so I might be the lone horse here, sell that property, and get Central under control. Close off the Route 80 side where the fire department is, make that a park area, putting it down into that little triangular area for the kids. On the lower side, where we go into 139, put the commercial and partial residential in that area. I think we're going to be spinning our wheels in the Wallfield area. Just to get egress on the top side, you're going to lose a lot of real estate. It just doesn't make sense. Dollar for dollar for square footage. Something to think about.
Other thoughts? Okay, for those of you who are sitting there saying, I have the right idea, but I don't want to put it out there right at the moment, we would really like, either through the EDC or directly, to hear from you. The more information we can gather at this stage in the process, the better job we can do reflecting the concerns that you have, the aspirations that you have, the practical possibilities that actually exist for this site. And let me just say again that everybody who came out today, who participated, who listened incredibly politely, should give themselves a round of applause and thank the folks at the school for hosting this, and also the EDC for putting in the volunteer hours to get this organized. There's one more hand over there.
Regarding contact information, is there a central area that people should send their thoughts to?
Well, Eric, where's Eric? Do you want to give them an address, or should we give them, I'm happy to give them our email address.
Mike, we send it to you? Send it to me.
Put a Facebook page.
You want to be part of that? Excellent, thank you.
So for now, we're going to let Mike continue to be the filter point for that. I trust everybody knows how to get in touch with him. He's done a pretty good job of getting stuff to us. We download that information and save it, and so it's all there. And maybe at some point we will be able to get a website or a part of a website or a link from the town website to some of the work as we get it organized. Okay, now one last practical matter. All the supplies that came with us today, as many as possible, we'd love to take back with us for the next workshop that we do. So leave them on the table, if you will, and we'll collect them. And those of you who were reporters, please give us your notes. Otherwise, everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.